Great. Well, thanks again, Jamie, Justin, Catherine, welcome. Just to start off, would love to just get some background about yourself and your career to date.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleased to be here. Thanks for having me. So I currently am at Ferrara as the Director of Media and Consumer Experience. To date, I have a media agency background. So I started my career with Omnicom, then moved to Horizon. And from there, actually took an interesting career path and went into consulting. So spent quite a bit of time with MediaLink's data and technology solutions practice, and then got the opportunity to move into really a CMO advisory role under Dana Anderson. So I kind of, started really in media and then got to see, got relatively deep into sort of mobile technology, and then got to be much more broad in thinking about what problems are CMOs facing today. Now at Ferrara, I absolutely love my role because I'm able to kind of use a lot of that eclectic background and really be a change maker, which is kind of where I've found my passion within the industry.
Awesome. Yeah, and introduce myself, Michael Mercede. I work on the sales team over here. Was also similar to Catherine, agency alum for some time, and then joined up at this company pretty early on and have seen it grow. I think in particular, we're kind of hitting this real stride as far as the channel goes in CTV video, which is great to see. So just to start, real high level, what goals or objectives do you look at the CTV channel for?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really think about video as a whole from a consumer first lens. So as we evaluate the CTV landscape, which is rapidly changing, we still really think about it at Ferrara as TV-like premium inventory. The most of the CTV inventory that we purchase tends to be lean back and us really wanting to be part of that experience for the consumer. So it's really seen as still as our broad reach tool, almost as if it were linear TV, just 2.0.
Got it. So really not too much of a distinction from linear outside of just how it's bought. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I would say that how it's purchased. And I mean, I shared with you, Michael, but I can share with the group, we are truly beyond linear TV at Ferrara. So as of 2022, we no longer have linear TV buys. So we really have positioned ourselves as digital first and digital only in the way that we connect with consumers. So we really follow where the consumers are, and this is where they are.
Got it. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of the path of how your, video strategy changed and kind of what prompted you guys to move away from linear as a channel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have some of the largest and most fastest growing confection brands within the Ferrara portfolio. Confection is very much a traditional CPG in the sense that we do feel like pretty much everyone with a mouth is a consumer. Household penetration is still critically important. But the bullseye of our target audience is really younger. So that 18 to 29-year-old, depending on the brand, of course. So from my vantage point, we really saw over the course of 2022, a lot of the trends just rapidly accelerate. So as we started to see that happen and viewership of linear TV, it was always trending downwards, but at least for our core target audience, I was looking at data prior to this, only about a third of those 18 to 29, according to Pew as of February, even have access to a linear TV subscription. So as we started to see that happen, we started to really recognize that we needed to shift to be where our consumer is. And so we really do pride ourselves on that consumer first lens in everything we do, to the point where, my entire group here, 1908X, is all about the consumer experience, where, one part in-house agency, one part marketing services, and one part center of excellence, and we're really just grouped around how do we provide the best consumer experience, and that happens to be largely within connected TV, especially as we still think about recency and frequency being really important in our category.
Got it. Yeah, it almost that stat when we first spoke about it kind of blew my mind a little bit. I think we look at TV trends with everyone in mind, right? Essentially anyone under the sun in our country, which still I think tells a story, certainly. But when you look at the age breaks in particular, which obviously predicts a trend, it gets much more extreme. It almost reminds me of mobile advertising when it was first coming about, right? Like the idea of a phone being used more to access internet than a desktop computer was almost a ridiculous concept, right? And then of course you looked at younger age breaks and it was happening like very, very early on. Then you saw Facebook kind of push mobile more, and all of a sudden the entire country consumes more in mobile than desktop. So I almost see it the same way. This is kind of a early indicator of a shift away from maybe just the traditional telecom cable access type of setup.
I love that comparison, especially having been a mobile specialist back in my agency days. I see so many parallels. I really appreciated what Justin said about the TV being the homepage of the home. And I think you're right, Michael, when we look at consumer usage, a lot of brands, at least in my category, are now focused on the younger consumer. How do we drive adoption? How do we continue to drive usage? And we really do see this huge break-off between generations, I believe, especially, when we think about the way that the device of the TV is used. For millennials, it's all streaming. It's all connected TV. When we start shifting even younger, I mean, the way that Gen Z is thinking about a TV, it has nothing to do with, our memories of linear TV at all. It's truly their homepage. Like, I really felt that was a great description of the way that the device is used in the home. So I don't know, I found that fascinating, and I love the parallel between this and mobile, a lot, 10 years ago.
Justin's eloquent, no doubt. So as far as how you guys have approached buying the connected TV medium, I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, have you looked kind of at publisher content first? Have you kind of looked at scale across various sources?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say we are very much in the experimenting phase. So we're very much testing and learning and trying to figure out what works for us. So we have been, I would say, more publisher focused, more thinking about aligning ourselves with the type of content that we want to be in, and more thinking about, targeting audiences, but very broad audiences, which isn't to say that that is the way of the future necessarily. I think I personally struggle a bit with the fragmentation of the landscape, and the need to, the way that connected TV is now purchased, it's so fragmented. It's hard to think about. I think we're on the precipice of possibility here. And we're all trying to kind of understand, for me at least, just because there is the capability to really granularly target, does that mean that that's the most effective way to use this capability? And I think, I always joke, if I were selling, eye drops, maybe, but I'm not. I'm selling confection, sweet snacking products. So I think we've been approaching it somewhat traditionally, in the sense of, this is still a broad reach medium. We still want to be places where our consumer are, and we want to be there frequently.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's interesting. It almost, I think the medium's kind of evolving from what was looked at as kind of a hardcore ad tech play. Let's target down to the most granular possible audience, with some sort of target in mind that may or may not be true, and all these things. I think it's changing a little bit in the sense of being looked at as a medium in a positive way, like linear, that can have mass reach, that can use targeting strategically, but not use targeting for the sake of targeting alone, right?
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely.
Which, I mean, it's fun when you're learning new technologies. You want to,
you want to use all the bells and whistles. You want to, be crazy with what you're doing. But sometimes, it's funny. I feel like we're in this resurgence of going back to the basics because of the loss of cookies, because of consumer trends, kind kind of going back to where they used to be, content being so important, advertising, I feel like we're back at, reach, frequency, and relevancy, which is kind of where we started a long, long time ago, before I was even in this industry.
Yeah, I hear you. As far as, non-ad supported content, when we spoke earlier, it was a pretty interesting topic. There's been the shift in consumer consumption, like you laid out, largely away from a traditional linear cable subscription to other forms. But of course, a big portion of that viewership is now against non-ad supported content on the likes of Netflix, HBO, et cetera. So how is that being dealt with, knowing kind of we're losing reach in maybe a couple different places?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of passion for this topic because I think it's really the future of our industry as a whole. And I think so for us, it really takes the form of product integrations. And that's all the way from the biggest, most splashy product integrations, that budgets can afford, all the way down to product integrations with influencers on social channels. And I think topical for CTV specifically, as we all know, only about 50% of the inventory is ad supported. So where does that leave brands, especially brands like mine, who have really moved completely away from linear TV? And I actually think it opens a lot of doors for how do we provide value to the consumer? How do we get relevant in their day-to-day? So we do everything from organic product integrations in streaming shows and movies, if you will, and paid integrations, and really feel strongly that that's sort of where we're going. I'm happy to share a really cool example that my team's been working on in partnership with our brand leads over on the Sweet Tarts side of the world. Sweet Tarts is one of our biggest and fastest growing confection brands. And they're all about multi-sensorial experiences and celebrating the multi-dimensionality that is in all of us as humans. So with their Be Both campaign and a partnership that we had with Viacom, we were able to integrate the Sweet Tarts Rainbow Ropes product into RuPaul's Drag Race. It's not out yet, so I won't give details about the integration itself, but I think that particular example for me is so kind of salient to this point of where the industry is going, because it really takes two equities that have a ton in common and builds them up together while we're making, really our product relevant with the consumers that we know enjoy it.
Got it. Yeah, I thought, I think the product integration is such a powerful method of advertising, especially because you're not dealing with clutter, as long as it's done in an authentic way, of course. Right. But I think when we were talking, knowing like I used to be a marketer for Land Rover, I think the thing that aha moment for me was when we were doing integration work for some of the Bond films coming out, and you're thinking, why is Land Rover cool? Why is Aston Martin cool? Why are they looked at as luxury brands, right? It's Bond has a role in that for sure, right? So I think these sort of things are becoming quite interesting, and you're seeing the non-ad supported platforms starting to do more of this, at least as a marketer, you start kind of noticing.
I think it's a huge opportunity. I think it'll change the way that we think about buying as we start to, as we start to get more sort of comfortable in this new landscape of CTV.
Great. So one thing we spoke about a little bit before too was the frequency management on CTV, right? So knowing kind of the traditional way to buy it, right? So if we can call it that in a medium that's pretty new, was to do publisher direct deals, right? So with a series of publishers, each of which has a scale, with the hopes that these consumers who are not viewing linear are viewing on these platforms, right? But of course, when you work with a lot of partners who don't understand frequency across each other, you start running into a lot of the same problems you did with linear itself, right? So I'd love to hear, anything you guys are doing currently to manage frequency, and what you might think the role of a TV manufacturer like ourselves or Roku or Samsung, et cetera, would do.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've highlighted what is probably one, if not one, the most or the biggest challenge. I think, you know, we are still this sort of part of TV, despite being looking and quacking like a duck, it isn't linear TV, and there's a lot to figure out. And this is one of the things I would say we certainly haven't figured out. Right now, our frequency management is very manual. It's very much who's viewing what, and, you know, do we feel like we're getting broad enough reach across all of our buy? It's not taking advantage of the fact that it can be more automated. And I think, you know, you and I were kind of geeking out a little bit about this unique position of OEMs in the marketplace, and kind of comparing it to the MVPDs of years of old, in the sense that there is a capability to provide a layer of frequency management at the device level. So, I mean, I think it's a huge opportunity, and I think, at least that I know of, it's not one that brand marketers have you know, reliably cracked yet.
Yeah, that I like the MVPD comparison. I think one thing, you know, as this company's evolved, I've learned more about is that, you know, a TV manufacturer has quite a bit of power with publishers, right? Because of course, publishers rely on us to distribute their app, just like we would rely on publishers to help us with inventory access, right? So like, I see the role of us going forward, amongst other things, as a aggregator of content that can then apply data that allows you to manage frequency across multiple publishers, right? Versus individual publisher buys that don't have that connection. So that's kind of how I see the role. Just like a cable company, right? When you buy linear TV, you don't go out and buy each individual station in each individual DMA, because that would be crazy. You need an army of people. But you know, we kind of can act as that intermediary in some ways, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting assertion, and I'm excited to see the industry continue to evolve, and excited to continue to think about what that means in terms of our buys, or what that could mean in terms of our buys. Could mean that they're very multi-layered. You know, what we consider to be one channel could be kind of a couple in one.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, for all the limitations linear TV has, there definitely are some good things that are happening. And I'd love to ask you about, like, what in linear would you like to see come to the connected TV space?
Yeah. I think a few things. I think some are already there. And I think, again, I feel like because of the rapid change in consumer behavior that was 2020, a lot of the legacy, you know, linear networks have really, I mean, we've just seen a step change in terms of how they're approaching. We've seen all these, you know, Paramount Plus, et cetera, launch. We've really seen a big difference. So a lot of my wishes are starting to come true. I think the biggest thing for me, I'm excited for when we have rules of the road. And don't get me wrong, I feel like it's so fun, and I love kind of existing in these areas of our industry that are just kind of, you know, just being shaped and participating in that shaping. For me, that's really fulfilling. But I also think, you know, every conversation I have, I learn something new, which is great, but I also unlearn a few things. So I'm excited for when we kind of have a common vernacular and a common understanding of what works, and honestly, some really strong kind of case studies on measurement. How do we measure connected TV? How do we really take advantage of the digitization of the TV?
Yeah, I think it brings up a good point of, you know, for the limitations Nielsen has, linear TV does have one thing provided by Nielsen that I think is quite powerful, which is a holistic cross-partner reach and frequency level, right? I mean, sure, there might be accuracy issues at some point, but overall, it's a standardized number buyers and sellers are using, something marketers can work with. I think that's a challenge I see right now in connected TV is there's some forms of that, but it doesn't have that standardization like linear.
Absolutely.
So what about like the other way? You know, I know there's been talks about addressable, you know, insertion into traditional linear. Is there anything like from connected TV you think that could make linear a more attractive offering, maybe to a brand like yours?
Ooh, trick question, Michael. I think we're going through a period of change where we won't be talking about beyond linear for too much longer, at least for younger audiences.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I play. So I don't know if I have a great answer to that question.
Yeah, I guess that brings up a good point. In your case, it's really not about the medium and how it's bought or measured as much as just consumers and where they are. Is that kind of safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. So would love to hear anything you're doing currently on the measurement topic to measure connected TV, maybe things you'd like to see to better measure connected TV.
Ooh, I mean, it's a bit tough right now. It's pretty fragmented. We really think about connected TV just like we think about all of our other kind of digital metrics, thinking about creative performance, thinking about, brand lift. We can do attribution studies. I think what I'm hungry for is really what you said about, kind of that common denominator that is Nielsen. And the benefit of that being holistic. So you can look at a number from Nielsen and understand what your, total rating points were for a period of time, et cetera. I'm kind of hungry for some more unified measurement. And I don't know if we're going to totally get there, at least not in the near future. But I think that there are probably some really interesting things brewing. And so I'm hoping for more holistic look across channels, or a more holistic look in general, just across, connected TV buy or streaming buy.
Amen.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of there, and it's tough too when you're, being a marketer, when you're selling up, especially to an executive team who's very fluid in linear TV, and they say, "Okay, great. How do we measure it?" And you're like, "Ooh, well." And then, that becomes an entire conversation. So I really think that it'll make my life certainly a lot easier when we can have a little bit more of a kind of a fluid, industry standard to lean on.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think what's interesting is there's tons of ways to measure it in very granular ways with individual partners or even groups of partners, but to do it across everything. There's amazing
things out there. The problem is just connecting them all.
Yep.
And how do you sort of individually look at value if it can't be necessarily crossed?
Absolutely. So would love to hear any areas of the industry that you're just currently learning a lot about, excited about, coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think that consumer behavior is changing so rapidly that we're kind of, or, I'll speak for myself, I'm kind of just watching. I think, just like the rest of my colleagues, Gen Z is fascinating to me. The way that they're behaving is fascinating. The way that we're seeing a resurgence of long form content, but it's more user generated or creator generated, is very interesting. I think that I'm really excited about the potential for things like live streams, going back to this usage of the device versus, thinking about TV as the content that's streamed on it, or, connected to from a linear perspective. I think that live streams are going to be very interesting, and this idea that we can experience things virtually through our TV is very interesting. But in general, I'm kind of just watching consumer behavior, and then thinking about what implications that has on my brands.
It actually brings up an interesting point of the idea of appointment viewing versus just on-demand viewing. Like,
yeah, like I said, it's like going all the way back.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And the way that Gen Z is so comfortable going, I mean, I think those of us who didn't grow up necessarily with our face in a device, feel a little bit virtually exhausted, but I think our younger cohorts are really comfortable with this idea of seamlessly floating from physical to digital worlds, and the way that will change, TV viewership is very interesting to me.
For sure. And what about for 2022, whether it's from Ferrara or just the industry as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. From a Ferrara perspective, selfishly, I've been here a little over a year. I think we're just, we have just sort of built the car and it's about to get tested on the racetrack. And I am so excited. I have great peer partners here at Ferrara. I have great agency partners in Mindshare and in the other agencies we work with. So I just think it's going to be a really exciting year. If you and I have this conversation this time next year, Michael, I'm hopeful that there'll be a lot of really exciting things to share. And then, again, from an industry perspective, I really think we're kind of at a wait and see point. A lot of the stuff we talked about, I'm really excited about. I'm excited about the evolution of measurement. I'm excited about really kind of the maturation of connected TV. I think we've even just seen in the last year or so, just a rapid acceleration. Excited about some of the things we talked about as it relates to, how do we think about frequency management? How do we think about managing fragmentation? Do we have layers of buys where we sort of have what would equate to network TV versus cable TV? And we're kind of building this really interesting kind of consumer first video buy. So I think we're on the precipice of what's possible. And that to me is just the most exciting place to be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's the last couple of years has been the first time in my career I've truly seen a viable alternative to move linear funds to other places at scale, right? It's a relatively new thing. I mean, in the past, you could have done it in incremental amounts over time, slowly, and now that shift has been made a ton easier with a lot of the offerings in the market, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to be able to, I think connected TV for many years was really an extension of a linear buy. A lot of digital was seen as an extension of linear buy. We were not necessarily at this place where we can do what Ferrara is doing and say, you know what, our consumer's here, and so that's where we need to be, and go ahead and sort of start at the center with the consumer and buy accordingly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Michael.
Appreciate it.